Hey everyone, and welcome to the Reaching the Heights podcast experience, episode 74. And in today's show, I'm going to be discussing with you guys the best way to work out your training schedule and put the most important things first. So, hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. First of all, a big apologies for not getting any content out or podcast material out over the last few weeks. Unfortunately, we've just been super busy with everything that's been going on Reaching the Heights on Demand, which is soon to be launched and is going to be very, very, very good in terms of a resource for Irish dancers. We have managed to hire quite a few people over the last few weeks, which means that through these busy times, we should still be getting other types of content out, like um, you know, Lauren's podcasts and videos and tips and so on. But when it comes to me, unfortunately, there's just one of me, and therefore I could not have time to do a podcast. So, one person emailed me and asked me why any of my podcasts hadn't been out. So it's at least I know that I have one listener, and it's funny because I'm doing this podcast from a hotel room. So for anybody's watching it, you'll be able to see the room, and so it's funny because Lauren has recently got her camera set up in the office and her podcast studio in the office, and she's asking me to try and get more visual work. And I don't have the time to try and fit this sort of stuff in, but I try my best to get it done. And B, she has the fancy studio, and I'm sitting here in a hotel room with really bad quality camera on the laptop. So apologies for the lack of quality, but I just think that it's better getting something out than nothing. Um, and so yeah, here we are. So guys, over the last couple of weeks, a couple of dancers have been emailing back and forward, asking some good questions around what they should be working on next. Basically off the back of the World Championships. So when you look at the feedback that they've got after the World Championships, if you have one or two or three things you need to work on, how do you prioritize those, right? So I guess the title of this podcast probably should have been how to prioritize the most important areas first in your training schedule. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about a little bit about today. Now, Lauren also done a good podcast last week regarding the rule changes around the World Championships, right? So obviously, they're now doing 5 rounds spread across 2 days and so on. And this is the first that I had heard about this, and immediately I started thinking around the fitness aspect of that, right? What kind of things would change in terms of a dancer? And I have to say, I really like it. I can see the reasons why a lot of people wouldn't like it, but if you're a dancer that wants to work hard, this is a perfect opportunity because it's going to eliminate a lot of people that aren't going to work hard. And so people don't like change, and generally they don't like change because it's generally means that they have to put in an effort of something, right? Like for example, um, I don't know, like for example, there's a new president, right? So now all of a sudden everything changes. People don't like it. You have to adapt to it. I don't know, Facebook or Instagram changed their algorithm, so no one's liking your photos anymore, not as much. So now all of a sudden you have to do something about it because you have to think of creative ways to get more attention or put out better posts or whatever. This is just the same, right? There's a millions of examples that we could think about, but when people change the criteria of anything, it's generally for because people now have to work a little bit harder, and it's an elimination process. And I think it's great because now dancers now have to work harder, they have to be fitter, they have to really understand the needs of the sport, which is something I've been going on about for a very long time and something not a lot of people understand. And so you got to do 5 rounds instead of three, couple of elimination rounds, and I just think that it's a very good thing. So if you're lazy and you don't want to work, then I'm sorry, but it's not going to be a great change for you. If you're someone that wants to work really, really hard, then it's going to be massively beneficial to you, and it's going to cut off a lot of people that don't want to work. So use it to your advantage, guys. Get up and let's get working. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about prioritizing your training. So let's say, for example, you got a few things that you need to work on, right? Generally, there's quite a few areas that people need to work on. Never really just one, but if it's one, we can factor that in as well. Let's say, for example, you have turnout issues, you have sharpness and power issues, um, technique issues, and fitness issues. These are the two categories that I kind of want to break it into, right? So when you have your issues and you want to prioritize them, think about how do we put them into two categories. So, for example, if you let's use those two, right? You have turnout issues, and you also have issues with stamina or speed or sharpness or something of that nature. Okay, so straight away I'm going, okay, well, I have a technique issue, right? So I don't have the basics nailed down. So I don't have the ability to do the correct turnout, or there's gaps in my knees, or I can't get a correct front click or whatever. And then I also can't maintain my speed to the end of the dance, or I don't actually even have any speed. I'm so robotic. I'm like a robot on stage. And so when you identify those things, we got to put it into priority. So what's the priority if someone has fitness issues and they also have technique issues, right? So if you don't really have the basics nailed down and you also have fitness issues, what would be the priority there? Okay. Now I'm asking you a question you can't answer, but try and answer that in your brain, in your mind. Is that if there's really no point in you trying to work on a fitness quality or devoting all of your time working on a fitness quality if you don't have the basics nailed down, right? Because me improving it, and I've said this before, right? If I try to dance coming off the back of being a sprinter and being fast and so on, if I'm trying to dance and then I'm going out and improving my speed 3 days per week, but I don't have the basic technique nailed down, I'm just making myself dance worse and faster worse, right? Or worse faster, because I'm literally just going to show the holes in my technique even more, right? So it's like getting an old person to walk down the street. You can't really tell their technique is bad or their weaknesses. You can't really see them until they start adding speed to it, and suddenly they're all over the place. So when you're a dancer that doesn't have great technique, as soon as we add speed and sharpness to that, you're highlighting the holes in your technique, okay? Because in order to do something faster, more powerful, your technique needs to be even more perfect. The coordination needs to be on point if you're going to add speed to something. So I'm not saying you shouldn't work on speed, but what I'm saying is you need to prioritize that. Now, when we look at prioritizing something today, I'm not really talking about, like, for example, okay, do that over that. So okay, you got turnout issues, you got crossing issues, and you got fitness issues. Okay, don't work on fitness but work on turnout and crossing. It should never be one of the other, because Ari Stanton is a combination of things. And like Lauren said in her interview with the BBC a few weeks ago, it is a sport, or it can be whatever you want it to be. Honestly, you can call it whatever you want, but at the end of the day, if you look at the term, if you look at the if you look at what a sport actually is and the definition of a sport, it falls right into the realms of what that definition is. And so you can really work on anything that is that you want, but it will always come down to how do you prioritize that. Okay, there's so many different factors in our stance that you need to work on. I wouldn't be leaving one out for another. I wouldn't be just solely focusing on technique and not any fitness, but I wouldn't be solely focusing on fitness, not any technique. Now guess what, guys? What do we see dancers do? They spend so long practicing their technique to get it, that when they actually get it, they forget that there's other things that they need to do. Because it's hard. Learning Ari Stanton is an extremely hard thing to do. So when you focus all of your time and energy into learning the technique, because it takes so much time and energy, you forget that there's other components that you need to work on. If I'm a hurdler or a pole vaulter, I need to spend so long on the technique of how to actually hurdle the hurdle. But it doesn't mean I don't need to still work on the speed and sharpness away from the hurdle so that I can combine that, right? And so when we look at prioritizing things, it's never one or the other. It's spending more or less time, and that's a sliding scale. It will always change. So to put this into better terms for you in words, because I'm really distracted at trying to do this in a hotel room on this video for the first time. So to put this into better terms, if I have 4 hours a week, okay, or 4 sessions a week, what I want to do there is, let's say I have pretty decent fitness, but my basic technique isn't great. I'm going to do that on a 3-to-1 ratio. So I'm going to need to work on my basic technique 3 times per week. And then on that 1 time per week, I'm going to maintain my fitness, because working on something 25% of the time is probably going to be enough to maintain it. But to make improvements, you need to be working on something the majority of the time. And therefore, that 75% of the week has to be spent on what you're trying to improve the most, right? What's going to get you the most marks. And in this case, what's going to get you the most marks is actually being able to do the basic technique first. However, that will soon change. So when you're able to get the basic technique nailed down, you have to change that. So when the basic technique improves, or you're coming up to a competition, we now go 50-50. Twice per week you're working on that, twice per week you're working on the fitness qualities. And then if it reverses the other way and you get the basic technique perfect, which is what 80% of dancers, you all have great technique, but you're what I call pretty robots, right? You're a robot that's like super pretty on stage, where the technique is nice, but there's no oomph in it, right? You need to stick a rocket pack on that robot. So then I would be doing it the other way. Then I'd be doing 75-25. So 75% of my time, I'm really trying to add speed, sharpness, and power to that technique. And 25% of the time, I'm working on the technique and maybe correcting some things, maybe learning some new steps, maybe taking a step out or adding something in, changing something. But 75% of that time needs to go to enhancing that technique, right? And that's always. Now, what you do within that subcategories is then even more person dependent, right? So to take it a step further, if you're spending 75% of the week on technique and 25 on fitness, what do you do in that time? So 75% of your technique work is 100% predicated on what technique you need to improve yourself. 25% of your fitness is 100% predicated on what type of fitness you need to improve or the stage that you're in during the year, okay? So if you're working on a 3-to-1 ratio or a 50-50 ratio or whatever, what you do in that is broken down even further to subcategories. So if it's fitness and you're doing 3-to-1 or 1-to-3, what do you do in that? So are we working on speed? Are we working on sharpness? Are we working on stamina, endurance? Are we working on agility? What is it that we're actually working on within that category? So top layer is basically identify what your weaknesses are, then write out the priorities and what category they come into. Is it fitness-based quality or is it a technique-based quality? Then when you get that, work out how much time do you have each week in total, okay? So calculate the amount of hours or the amount of days. Then the next category is, okay, well, what's the priority? Prioritize that on a 3-to-1 basis, okay? So 25% on something you're already good at because you want to maintain it, 75% on something that you're not that great at. As that changes, and it should if your training's effective, things change too. So 50-50, then it might go the other way. And then the final layer on that is you basically want to divide each of those down into little subcategories. So what you're working on fitness day will depend on your weakness. What you work on in your technique day or days will depend on what the biggest technique issue is. So guys, I hope that makes sense. I'm going to keep this one quick and sharp. If anybody has any questions about that, please let me know or send me through your examples. I hope that this video doesn't come out too bad. If it does, there might not be one. We might just put the audio up. No, I'm joking. I'll try to get it out. So the purpose of the videos is just to try and get a little bit more video content on Instagram, TV, and YouTube and so on. But right now, if you're listening or watching, the channels that we're out on are going to be Instagram TV, YouTube for visual, and then SoundCloud, Spotify, and iTunes for any audio. And that's it. So guys, thank you so much for listening. Go prioritize your weaknesses, and then start prioritizing your training around that based on your time and what's most important to you. And I will see you all back here next week.